In continuation of my previous cut content and episode breakdown video, today we'll be taking a look at Season 3 Episode 13, which is titled Nations and Invitations, adapting from Chapter 2 and 3 of the Volume 8 light novel. So in today's video, I'll be covering the light novel contents that were removed from the meetings in the Armed Nation of Dwargon and the Sorceress Dynasty Sarion, along with learning more about Rimuru's proposal to Ramiris about building her Labyrinth in Tempest. As usual, a spoiler warning for anyone that hasn't watched the episode yet or might find the cut content information I go over to be spoilers. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and share with your friends. With that being said, the episode begins in the Armed Nation of Dwargon where an emergency conference was currently taking place to discuss about their future relationship with the Tempest Federation, and the anime version actually removes quite a bit of content from the light novel, so I'll be going over them. For starters, it was stated that King Gazer along with all his ministers were present for the meeting, but in the anime, only Dolph, Vaughn and Giant were shown to be present. Furthermore, this wasn't explicitly mentioned in the anime, but when Giant stated that Rimuru has become stronger than King Gazer, she was implying that Hinata possesses the same level of strength as King Gazer, and if she was defeated by Rimuru, it meant that their nation would be helpless if the Demon Lord decided to turn hostile towards them. That's why Giant stated that Rimuru was a threat in the anime. Adding to this, their discussion about Rimuru's subordinates being able to utterly decimate the Holy Knights and the 10 Great Saints without suffering a single casualty were again not covered in the anime. And they were essentially fearful of Tempest because not only their leader can now easily overpower King Gazer, but their military might have even surpassed Dagon. However, like we see in the anime, King Gazer was confident that Rimuru will never betray them and wishes to continue their friendship with Tempest. He even stated in the light novel they'll accept the proposal from the Holy Empire of Luvalia since it was Rimuru who helped to broker this deal. Not only that, the light novel also explained why King Gazer still believed in Rimuru because during his last encounter with the newly ascended Rimuru back in Season 2, King Gazer had used his unique skill Tyrant to analyze Rimuru, but he wasn't able to sense any malicious or malevolent aura from him. That's why King Gazer stated that he was still the same good-natured slime in the anime. Besides that, the internalized thoughts of King Gazer were not included in the anime as well. So to explain, he was actually praising Rimuru internally for his ingenuity and ability to win the hearts of everyone he meets. But he also stated that if Rimuru's vision for the future might trigger another Great Tenma War, he would gladly support Rimuru no matter what, which would have been nice to see in the anime since their relationship has always been interesting to watch. Now, with the serious topic finished, Henrietta presented King Gazer with the invitation to the Founders Festival, and this wasn't shown in the anime but in the light novel. The ministers were all commenting about how delicious the food and amazing the amenities in Tempest were, even being jealous that Vesta gets to freely do research and have fun in the Monster Nation, so they were constantly pestering King Gazer to bring them along in his entourage. That said, King Gazer decided to accept the invitation and the light novel actually provided a wholesome dialogue from him. He stated how he would not be attending as a king but rather as Rimuru's senior and friend, knowing that he would have trouble handling some of the foreign nobilities and dignitaries, so he wanted to ease the tension during the festival. It was unfortunate this wasn't included in the anime because it expands on the friendship between King Gazer and Rimuru. Regardless, it was stated in the light novel that King Gazer has another reason as well. He wanted to show the other nations the relationship that Dagon has with Tempest, being one of their first and closest allies. Moving over to the Sorceress Dynasty Sarion, we finally get the official anime appearance of Empress Elmesia, and she was described in the light novel to be one of the oldest beings in the Tensura world because of her extremely pure elven blood, which made her quite defensive about her age. She is also known as a High Elf, the progenitor to the common elves that we see in the show. In any case, Elmesia was currently meeting with Aloud to discuss about the Founders Festival invitation, but before that, we see a flashback to 3 months prior where Aloud reported to Elmesia about his visit to Tempest, and the anime really captured word for word the childish and snarky attitude of Elmesia towards Aloud for apparently not bringing her along to such an interesting place and keeping all the fun to himself. And it was stated in the light novel that after a rant, she threw a tantrum and froze the budget for all the projects belonging to Aloud like the scientific collaboration and road construction with Tempest. It was for this reason that Aloud decided to present her with the invitation to the Founders Festival in the anime to cheer her up, because if he visited Tempest again without informing Elmesia, he definitely would have pissed her off even more, and the consequences might have been even worse than just freezing his budget. But back to the meeting, the following interaction where Elmesia was talking about the pastry chef Yoshida and dealing emotional damage to Aloud by showing off a close relationship with Aaron actually had no significance to the story. Rather, Elmesia only wanted to tease him because she thought that Aloud knew about Yoshida's involvement with Tempest, so he wanted to keep all the delicious cakes to himself and use it to bribe Aaron to come home, which is the reason why Elmesia was angry with Aloud in the first place. She is so petty and I absolutely love it. However, from a writing and character perspective, this interaction was slightly added to showcase Elmesia's ability to completely dictate and lead the conversation with Ella because of her overwhelming experience having lived so long, while also helping to establish what kind of person she is, a sarcastic and shrewd individual. Also, it was stated in a light novel that she normally behaves in a cold and emotionless manner towards others except for Ella's family, who are the only people that she trusted, hence why she is so casual when talking to Ella and such good friends with Aaron. Having said that, they went back to Rimuru's invitation and Ella was quite worried about Elmesia's choice because in a light novel, it reveals that Sarion was a nation comprised of 13 houses, all under the rule of the Imperial House, which Elmesia sits at the top, and she is mainly responsible for mediating the relations between the houses, along with serving as the supreme commander of the military since the other houses don't have their own standing military. However, some of the houses often interfered with state affairs and even believed that the Empress doesn't care about the politics at all, so they secretly attempted to amass power for their own houses in hopes of someday overthrowing the Imperial House, not knowing that Elmesia is already aware of this and that she simply chooses to ignore them. And since having the Empress visiting another country would be a major state affair, Ella was sure some of the houses would take the opportunity to either assassinate Elmesia or ruin her reputation with the other houses. And it was disappointing the anime did not follow the light novel here, because when she reassures Ella to not worry about those children who plan to usurp her, she was described to be exerting the unique aura of a ruler, which would have been awesome to see play out in an episode. On a side note, did you know that Ella's mother, Alice Grimwald, was actually Elmesia's grandmother, and her father is Ella's brother, making Ella her uncle, but because he was born much later, he was still just a child in the eyes of Elmesia, which is honestly quite funny, so it's not surprising that Ella doesn't even hold a candle to her. But continuing on, we get another instance of Elmesia showing the tremendous amount of wisdom and intelligence she possesses when they started to discuss about the highway agreement between Sarion and Tempest. And even though much of the conversation that took place in the anime pretty much followed the light novel, I just wanted to point out how Elmesia was able to completely interpret Rimuru's intentions without even having to speak to him. Basically, because Tempest agreed to take on the entire cost of building the roads without help from Sarion, they will have full control of the tolls, and if Sarion decided to negotiate for a lower price or share in the profits acquired in the far future, they'll have no bargaining power since they obviously can't pressure a demon lord with force either. And with Tempest almost guaranteed to become the center of trade in this new era, it meant that Sarion won't be able to completely reap the benefit from this prosperity, and might even suffer some revenue loss as well due to the monster nation monopolizing the trade routes. And this is what makes Tensura great. We know that Rimuru is quite powerful in terms of fighting, but this episode really cements that he is insanely gifted as well when it comes to things like politics and economy, having the vision to do what he wants while also winning against other nations without the need for fighting. Nonetheless, the rest of the conversation that happened in the anime about Elmesia ultimately deciding they can't miss the Founders Festival will play out the exact same as the light novel. Now then, over at the Tempest Federation, Rimuru returned from his trip in the Bloomer Kingdom in the previous episode and was contemplating about additional events he can create to attract more visitors, because Meowmouse informed him that it wasn't commercially viable to constantly host martial tournaments and they needed an attraction that can bring in people on a daily basis. That's when he heard a commotion nearby, and in the light novel, he immediately knew who the troublemakers were by using his universal perception, so he approaches Ramiris, and the voice actress was really having fun with her performance here, constantly switching the tone of her voice when she tried to gain sympathy from Gokyu and then ultimately resorting to dress when he wasn't having it. And the subsequent interaction Rimuru had with Ramiris will occur in a similar fashion to the light novel, although it was still funny seeing the once competent trainee turning into a complete idiot thanks to a master, and I honestly feel bad for Beretta, having to be the one that explains this shit show to Rimuru. So we are then treated to a flashback inside the dwelling of the spirits where Ramiris was discussing with Beretta and Trainee about moving to a new location, and much of that conversation will follow the light novel. Again, it was still hilarious seeing Beretta being the only one with some shred of reasoning and self-awareness, because even though she wanted to move closer to Rimuru as well, Beretta knew they needed a better plan than just hoping for the kindness and generosity of Rimuru. Anyways, back to the present. Having understood the situation, the rest of the interaction had pretty much unfolded accordingly to the light novel, and despite being annoyed that Ramiris ordered Trainee to put the Tempest guards to sleep, Rimuru wasn't actually mad at her. Rather, he was inspired by her to create a dungeon for adventurers to explore or fight monsters in, so he decided to invite Ramiris back to Tempest, where they can further discuss about this matter. But before moving to the meeting hall, in the light novel, Rimuru will inform Gokyu to repurpose the shack into a resting cabin for the Tempest guards to use. Over at the meeting hall, Rimuru was discussing with Gokyu about creating an empty space below the Colosseum to serve as the entrance room into Ramiris' Labyrinth, but because the structural integrity would be compromised, they decided to shift the position to the side, and it's nice to see technical details like this included into the anime. And Ramiris, understanding what Rimuru meant, she became overwhelmed with joy because she can finally stay in Tempest. With that being said, Rimuru proceeded to explain his intentions for the Colosseum and the dungeon, as well as the job that Ramiris will be handling, with much of it going accordingly with the light novel. But it was funny, the only takeaway Ramiris got from this interaction was that she will no longer be called a jobless shut-in anymore. Additionally, the reaction of Ramiris in the anime upon hearing the amount of money she will earn from this corporation was hilarious as well, and Rimuru even stated in the light novel how Ramiris seems to be quite obsessed about money. Nonetheless, Rimuru quickly dragged Ramiris back to reality so they can begin drafting the plan for the Colosseum just like we see in the anime, and much of what they talked about were the same as the light novel, although the episode doesn't mention how Rimuru plans to add train tracks on the streets and even a station near the Colosseum in the future to improve the travelling and transport infrastructure of Tempest. But to continue, when choosing a location for the Colosseum, Rimuru couldn't use some of the open areas since they are being occupied by the lycanthrope refugees, so Ramiris suggested to simply move them into a labyrinth, although she can only teleport inanimate objects, whereas for living beings, she requires their consent before transporting them into the labyrinth. That's when Ramiris will explain how her ability works, and the anime actually skips this, so to explain, she reveals that her skill is called Labyrinth Creation or Mini World, and as the name implies, it allows her to create a labyrinth, and inside this structure, she has complete control over anything or anyone inside and near the labyrinth. For example, she can even take away the weapons and equipment of people who are directly outside, or instantly kill them once they step foot into the labyrinth. Furthermore, Ramiris will answer 5 specific questions proposed by Rimuru as well. The first is how many floors she can make, and there was technically no limit, but she only has the strength to construct and maintain around 100 floors. Next, she has asked how long it would take to create the floors, and it takes roughly 1 hour per floor, although with more floors added, the energy consumption of Ramiris will also increase. The third question was what will happen to living creatures that stay inside the labyrinth. Essentially, all living beings and even spiritual beings can inhabit the space with no issues, and if the floors are filled with an abundance of magicals, monsters can even spawn naturally. For the fourth question, it was whether if Ramiris can alter the interior structure and layout of the labyrinth, and the answer is yes, she can freely change the entire structure in around an hour. Also, she is able to create any structure she wants except for organic things. The last question was the most important. What happens if someone dies inside the labyrinth? Basically, before anyone enters the labyrinth, Ramiris has to first receive their permission, and once they consented, she has complete authority over the people who entered, so even if they died and she was aware of their position, she can simply resurrect them without any issues and send them outside the labyrinth. However, if there are too many people, she will have a difficult time to track them, but Ramiris does provide a simple solution. People who enter simply have to wear the items created by her. Having answered all the questions, we get a hilarious sequence in the anime where Rimuru was surprised at how useful Ramiris actually was, which offended her greatly, but he does compliment her afterwards, and the episode ends with her relishing in a moment.
思わないような感じかな。お前なあ。
But yeah, that was my breakdown for episode 13, and I really enjoyed seeing the technical aspects mentioned in the episode, like the economic and political side of the Tensura world. And my favorite moment by far was the reveal of Empress Elmesia, although I did enjoy the comedic elements from the episode as well, like seeing the interactions with Ramiris. So what about you guys? Did you enjoy the newest episode, and what did everyone think of Elmesia? Feel free to share your opinions and comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed this cut content video, remember to leave a like, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification button for more cut content videos as well. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe everyone.